Welcome to the Bhakti Moves podcast. We are blessed to have the association of His Grace Jadhavacarya Das, who is the disciple of His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness.
This is the Bhagavad Gita by Prabhupada, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me. Many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they attained transcendental love for me. This is where Krishna is speaking, and he is explaining that being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. So you have to remember the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna was speaking to Arjuna, and he was explaining to Arjuna how the essence of the Bhagavad Gita had been lost. And he also explained that he originally spoke this knowledge over 2 million years ago. 2 million years ago. To the sun god Vivaswan. And Vivaswan instructed it to Manu. And I think the Manu should be a focus that we all have, because we need to understand. Prabhupada said that there are 400,000 different species of human beings all throughout the universe. As a matter of fact, one devotee asked him one time, he says, well, Prabhupada, we only see a few of those here. He said, that's because you're not understanding that throughout the universe, there are many, many, many different species of human beings. So at that point, 2 million years ago, the knowledge was reinstated. Technically, after the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Arjuna, 5,000 years ago, it was reestablished. And that's why we have the experience right now of having the words, the words of God directly from his mouth. This is not somebody made this up, this is their reality. And Prabhupada explained, he says that this process, Mad Bhavam Agata, this human form of life is meant for going back to Krishna, back to home, back to Godhead. This Krishna consciousness movement is giving information to the people in general to make life successful. What is that successful life? To go back to home, back to Godhead. This is not our home. This material world, this is foreign country. We are just like I am traveling all over the world. My home is in India, but I am going to so many countries, Europe, America, Canada, Australia, Africa. But my home is in India. This is a crude example. Similarly, we are all part and parcel of Krishna. Mammai Vamso Jiva Bhuta. This is from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 7. Krishna says, all these living entities, they are my part and parcels. So Krishna is Satchidananda Vigraha. This is very difficult. I'm breaking from the text now. This is very difficult to understand, because in our upbringing, in our teachings, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Vedas, without understanding the Vedas, we don't understand that we are actually all living entities, even the blades of grass, the trees, the insects, all forms of living entities, which we can't imagine mentally, are all part and parcel of God. This is actually, everything is God. Everything. However, we have to understand, as it says, that not even a blade of grass can move without the will of the Lord. That's because he is within the heart of all living entities, whether they are animal or mineral or vegetable, and that we have gone through these 8,400,000 different species in past lifetimes. Past lifetimes means that we are able at this point in human life to actually never have to come back and take another birth. That's our goal. However, from my experiences, I've also read and understood that we're not going back to Godhead by ourselves. That selfishness is what got us in this mess in the first place. So therefore, we have to give this knowledge to others in order for it to be complete. Otherwise, we become, Prabhupada explained, we're just simply misers. We're acting in a miserly fashion because we're not actually giving. If we don't give Krishna, we can't receive Krishna. Do you understand? And in the text of the purport, Prabhupada explained that, as described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the supreme absolute truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily concept of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Right, Renal?
Right, absolutely.
Absolutely, full of ignorance and completely miserable. So you should write that down on a piece of paper and put that sentence particularly. And that you will, again, it says, in the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Right. Therefore, people in general keep the same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. So this is all part of what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a very awkward situation, being that we are not this body, but we're spirit souls, but we're still trying to, we haven't fully decided that we're going to surrender. Our surrender is limited according to our senses. And our senses are addicted to household life, wife, family, society, nationality. All of these things are going in through our mind when we make decisions, because we think that we're actually part and parcel of this material world. That is why we are suffering. We're not part and parcel of this. We're like foreigners in a foreign land without the proper. We don't have the right kind of credentials. Our visa and our passport is not correct. We're trying to live inside of a shell that really is not in our favor, and we're struggling and we're suffering. This is all part of material life. Prabhupada also says that therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. When you speak to people, I don't care, it could be anybody up to and including my Aunt June, who I know personally had a direct line to God. If somebody needed a prayer, Aunt June was the one who knew exactly, because she was very devout in her belief. However, her and probably anyone who is in the Islam, Judaic or Christian, and also Buddhist philosophy, do not really all have a clear vision and understanding of who is God. To them, the best they could do is come up with some idea that they may have seen in the Ten Commandments or some of these other movies that are made. But they can't understand who is God, because it is part of the materialistic, impersonal concept. That's why we say in our prayers, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nirvisation Sunyavadi Prasachada Satani. That means that those of the impersonalism and voidism in the West So when people talk about God, they don't understand who they're talking about. And when we try to present them, and Prabhupada has said this many times, that here's God. Look, this is what he looks like. This is his clothes. This is his language. This is his girlfriend. This is the food he likes to eat. These are the cows that he likes to attend. People have a very difficult time seeing Krishna or God in the form of a person, because our whole society and whole Judeo-Christian concept is based on not being able to see God. Whereas in the Vedas,
Spookism.
very clearly, excuse me?
Spookism.
What is it? Spookism.
Spookism. Yeah. Spooks and spirits and weird stuff that's outside of any tangible concept in a physical body. Spookism.
Yeah, right. They can't imagine. The imagination is depending upon the individual. So therefore, there is not a cohesive understanding of God in the same way that we understand Krishna. And fully, it also says, therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. They just can't get past that. To imagine, okay, first of all, it's impossible to imagine the gigantic form of Mahavishnu. If you understand, Mahavishnu is lying in the causal ocean. And from him, his breathing, everything is coming. All the planets, all the universes are within this one shell, looks like an egg. And there are unlimited of these. The yogis say they don't know how many breaths Mahavishnu has taken. So to understand that is very difficult. And even when we look at the sky or look at the stars at night and realize how vast this universe is, it's impossible for our tiny brains to fully appreciate what God is and how he looks and how he behaves and so forth. So again, Prabhupada, part of his mission, and I'm saying this to myself, I have to write a book someday. It's called The Impersonalism of Voidism. That's because Prabhupada realized that this is the most dangerous condition that people are in, of being void of understanding the personal nature of God. Why? Because eventually they believe, or they'll fall into the illusion that they're actually God themselves. They understand the percentage, they don't understand how they are spiritually. They just believe that by becoming one with God, then everything will work out. And that's called Brahmanati. Brahmanati is Brahmanati, Paramati, Bhagavanati, there's Brahmanati, Paramati, and Bhagavanati. In the Brahmanati, the first stage of realization, which the Buddhists and the impersonalists, or the Mayavadis, all believe there is no existence, personal existence outside of this material body, that we become one with the Supreme. When Prabhupada said that this is actually like committing spiritual suicide, because when you can enter into Brahman, those yogis that are capable are able to enter into Brahman, but there is no activity. So eventually they all come back. Let me continue to read. This is the highest perfection. Let's see. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence, attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. That is because we are all fearful. I just heard Prabhupada say that. We are all fearful. We're all afraid, ultimately, of death, because we don't understand what's going to happen after death. We don't understand who we are. But here's something that I realized, that when people have these near out-of-body experiences, they usually are not in a fearful state, because fear is really generated by our false ego.
Yes.
Ego is telling me that I'm a husband, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a this, I'm a that. Is giving me all of these. But when you're free from the, or at least, let me put it, when you are out of the body, your true character and the percentage that is available to you is the percentage that you are originally, which is 78% of the qualities of God. 7%, which is a lot. So really, ideally, most people have no idea of their true capabilities. It's just like Lord Brahma. Your true spiritual character is capable of creating and destroying planets. That's how powerful you really are. And I had this realization one time. I was looking at this old man trying to go across the street. He was just shuffling across. And I thought, yeah, this is sad, because the real character inside of that body, who is now completely identified with that body, has the ability to create and destroy planets. So this is why we have to understand further, and I'll continue to read. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. And we understand that now, particularly in this age. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. That is the, Prabhupada again said, that is the committing spiritual suicide. Because then, without personal understanding of God, you cannot understand what you are. And if you don't know what you are, you won't understand what you are meant to be or to do. Therefore, it's impossible to make any spiritual advancement. And ultimately, you fall into an illusion. It says this also, you become bewildered. Maya is so strong, she can continue to do this to you birth after birth after birth, until you finally find the spiritual master who can give you the right information and the process in order to become purified. So I'll continue reading. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Prabhupada said that this material body is a disease. We're diseased in our consciousness. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause. They want to, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. And I've met many people who, I just met a lady not too long ago. She was said that she was Catholic, but now she's become atheist. She was technically not really atheist because she still believes in God. It's just that now she's become agnostic. So many of the people who are actually, they just give up. If at this point, just like me, at this point, I'm 75 years old, if I hadn't understood Krishna consciousness and been a brahmachari, it would be almost literally impossible for me to change my thinking and my consciousness to understand Krishna. It is very, very rare. I've only seen a small amount of devotees who actually in their older days were able to understand, but that because previous lifetimes they were very strong in their Krishna consciousness, their devotional service. But normally at this age, it would be impossible because the attachment to home and family and to gratify the senses is almost impossible to overcome. And technically, no, it is impossible to overcome by mental speculation. It is impossible. So, this last class of men take shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual visions. Mm-hmm.
Say that again, please.
Comment?
Repeat that.
That's right. We're going to read that part again.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have this? Do you have this page available? Are you looking at the page? Also?
I got it closed up.
Okay.
Right. Where you work, because I'm working.
Yeah, I just want to hear that again, because that's so apropos to today.
Yeah. This Christian is always apropos.
Yeah.
Is always apropos. We just have to understand that he knows what exactly all of us need at one particular point in time. It says, this last class of men, which are in this state, are sometimes, this last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. This is very difficult because we are by nature attracted to being intoxicated. I've had a very difficult time thinking outside of this intoxication, because there's always a purpose that we have to want to understand God according to our own limited mental capacity.
Yes.
Wherein we actually need to overcome the intoxication. Intoxication not just from a particular drug or alcohol or what have you, but we're also intoxicated with our immediate surroundings, our children, our home, our wife, our family. Everything is all part of the intoxication that keeps us in this illusion. It's almost like we're self-medicating with this illusion that I am either not this body, I'm not spirit soul, or I'm one with God. That is a strong limitation that we all have. So let me read this again. The last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual visions. Prabhupada explained that intoxications or drugs is actually, all it does is give you an ability to be able to see things in a different perspective, but it does not give you knowledge. It does not give you knowledge. I know for myself, before I became a devotee, I used to take acid sometimes, and I would see things in people, and I just was wondering, why is it like this? They look like they're this and that and another. They didn't look normal. And I realized it wasn't that I was perceiving what I was perceiving, but I didn't have any knowledge. So until I had spiritual knowledge, it was almost impossible for me to understand what I was actually looking at. Prabhupada continues, one has to get rid of all three stages of material consciousness: attachment to material life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. And that was why people commit suicide, because a lot of people, they realize this is not their real home, this is not their real condition, this is not the real existence that they are supposed to have, and they decide they want to end it. Of course, there's another part of that if they commit suicide, then they become ghosts, and then they really have problems.
Yeah, it's even harder to get out now.
Well, unless you understand the science and you know how to be able to pray to Lord Shiva, you can't get out. You have to wait until by higher authorities that you're given a material body to go into. And that is why also, even our forefathers, in all societies, we have this belief that it is our responsibility to perform certain rituals and rites to be able to help our forefathers. Normally, a young man has the responsibility to perform certain activities in order so that the forefathers, his father in particular, does not suffer and have to go to hell. As if they're struggling in a hellish condition, then by chanting, they will be liberated. But if not, no one is performing any sacrifices or any rituals, then they will continue to suffer. But Prabhupada also said that if we simply engage in this Krishna consciousness and chant and engage in service, that all of the whatever rituals that needed to be performed are automatically satisfied by our engaging in bhakti yoga. So therefore, you can rest assured that by performing this bhakti yoga, you will also help your previous ancestors. That's how deep all of this is, and it goes even deeper as time goes on. So let me continue to read. To get free from these three stages of material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of God. So to get free from these three stages, that is why we need to engage and follow the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. Otherwise, it's almost impossible, because we can't get out otherwise, because we can't overcome our false ego. The false ego is the part that trips us up at the very end. Mentally, you can overcome a lot of things, but you can't overcome your false ego because you are so covered that you don't understand who you really are until that veil, as we know, many people talk about the veil, until the veil is lifted. And that veil is that we are not in the material world, technically. We're actually in the spiritual world, but we don't see it properly because of our false ego. So, according to Prabhupada again, according to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the science of devotional service, it says, in the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service, under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness and self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love of God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is what people don't understand. You ask people, well, what do they do when they go back to the spiritual world? They can't answer. They don't know. Only in the description of activities in the spiritual world is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which I suggest all of you, if you haven't already read it, I would say that this is something that you should read the first chapter or the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Both Mike and Ronell, particularly, you need to read Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto. Read the whole thing, because a lot of the questions that where you're at right now in time and space, you have the ability to understand this knowledge because it was explained. Just think of it like this. This was explained specifically for you. Mm-hmm. It was made for you. When Srila Vyasadeva spoke this information for the Vedas, and as it was written by Ganesh, for this age specifically, it was made for you. You can understand, it's not that it was made for everybody, it was made for you because you are anxious to understand about God. And one of the things Krishna told Arjuna, he says, I'm explaining this knowledge to you because you are not envious of me and you are my friend. And once you have that friendship relationship with God, in the beginning it's very difficult to understand. But if you just have a friend relationship, I'm trying now more so than ever to become friendly with Krishna. I know that Krishna is in my heart. I know that he's been with me for a long time. I know that he loves me more than anybody loves me. And that by remembering him constantly, I will be safe. But by forgetting him, that is when I suffer even more mentally. I see that even now. So to finish the final verse, I'll read this again. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service, remember this. What is the word? What's the significant word there? Slow process. There is nothing fast about Krishna consciousness. I know I've been doing this for over 54 years now. And I feel like I'm just now getting a grip on what I'm even supposed to understand.
Yes, sir.
Okay? So again, by the slow process of devotional service, Krishna explains this to Arjuna. He says, step by step, if you engage in devotional service, step by step, by following the regulative principles, eventually you will attain the highest stage. And it says, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations that result in void philosophy, then one can ultimately attain the abode of the Supreme Lord. Again, that fearfulness. And you find people, I know this one lady I met, she was afraid of roaches, completely frozen. Like she couldn't move. It was impossible. And what she was really afraid of was death. How? And many people are, and constantly.